Hi, everybody. It's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. This is the Explorer coaching section, and I don't even know what session we're up to, but we've been doing this for a good long while. As I've said many times already, this was not the series I had planned, but it's the series it became, and I'm having a lovely time. So as long as you guys are getting benefit out of it, I'd like to just continue on this track until we finish the subject matter that we'd kind of pulled together. So yeah, so last time around, we started talking about this layer of the change grid that divides it into the energies. And yeah, we're talking about 16 energies, but the truth is that there are going to be subtle changes in the energy, even if you move from one little coordinate pair over to its neighbor. So there's always going to be subtle changes in the energy someone's experiencing. But we find it really useful as ChangeWorks practitioners to be able to say to someone, as far as this activity is concerned, at this particular moment in time, this is the energy you're feeling around it. And whatever that energy is going to end up having impacts on your thoughts and your feelings and the actions that you take and the decisions you make, etc. And so I think it's really kind of interesting to just look at things from an energetic perspective rather than from something like personality typing. So that's not to suggest that personality typing doesn't have its place and doesn't have its value. I truly believe that it does. But we don't want to talk about people's personalities. We don't want to talk about people like there's some kind of a static thing. People are very dynamic, and a lot of the changes that you're going to see in the way they're choosing to think, behave, express themselves, etc., it's all tied to the activity. And so we want to look at the activity, look at the situation, and then we can overlay personality if we're trying to help them develop, the best strategy to get them out of their situation or into the situation, depending on what the goals are of that specific situation. Anywho, for a quick review, we talk about there being four basic energies. These four basic energies we describe as driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. There is a person. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Are you aware that the screen is black?
How unfortunate for everyone trying to watch.
Yeah, I don't have anything either.
Yeah, I thought it was me actually. I was
I
gonna
keep
log
trying
off
to
to log
change
on.
it.
He's doing it.
That's all right. I'll just go ahead and stop the share, and then we'll just reinitiate it. Like I said, you should have seen the problems we were having in Europe about it. Now I'm going to share the screen.
I can see your cursor was moving, but the screen itself was black.
There we
go.
No.
Yeah, that's got to be a Harry Potter kind of thing coming in. Oh, I got to tell you guys real quick. Special effects. Oh my goodness. The special effects on stage were just mind-boggling. If you're a fan of Harry Potter, reach out and I'll give you a glimpse into one or two of their crazy effects. Anywho, so there is a personality test that you could take that would establish whether you are a driver type, an expressive type, an amiable type, an analytical type. And although we've looked at so many of them, they all get to be a blur after a while. I think it was social styles. That might have been Tony Alessandra. But quadrant-based personality typing systems go back prior to 1900. So there's a lot of them. And one of them actually used these identifiers. And I said, well, let's use those identifiers only because I think they're easy for someone to readily, kind of embrace and understand as we're working our way through and around this. So, what just happened? One moment. My participant list disappeared. There it is. Okay. So anyway, drivers are trying to go somewhere. I mean, what I like about these labels is that I think they really are pretty straightforward and, point people in the best direction of the best definition. Drivers are going somewhere. They're trying to accomplish something, get from point A to point B. So that driver energy is all about accomplishing something, doing something, whatevering. The expressive energy wants to express. It wants to talk about what its thoughts and feelings are. It wants to hear other people's thoughts and feelings. It wants to be in the moment. But rather than trying to go somewhere, it's more like the expressive energy is just where it is. And in the place that it is, it's feeling lots of stuff. And it wants to share those feelings and have other people share their feelings as well. Now, at an extreme, that those feelings could be feelings of being in danger. So obviously, if you're in a situation where there's a bear smiling and salivating at you, you might kind of become very expressive, and it's all going to be that those kinds of emotions and feelings, thoughts, etc., that are going to, naturally be brought forward when you're in such a situation. The amiable energy wants to care about something, generally about other people or other causes, but they're people of more of a mission, not a mission to really go out there and conquer the world, which is what the driver energy is really kind of all about. It's more about driving the energy of wanting to take care of something or take care of somebody, do something good for whoever is involved. So the emphasis not being placed on the person who is feeling this amiable energy, but on others that this person feels strongly about. And then an analytical wants to understand something. Many times an analytical collects data for no real reason other than to just have it. And so great people to have on your Trivial Pursuit team, but not necessarily people that are, out there doing things to, impact the world around them. So that's the primary energy. We did say, well, primary energy or thinking of yourself as being just one of these things is just too limiting. It's not particularly useful to try to help somebody better understand themselves and how they happen to be dealing with whatever the situation at hand happens to be. So we want to go into a secondary energy. So last time around, we talked about that there are four basic types of drivers. There are driven drivers, expressive drivers, amiable drivers, and analytical drivers. And all you do when you're really using these words and thinking about these energies is to just remember that the word that's in all caps is the primary energy. So it's the one that's front and center. It's the one that's going to express itself most thoroughly, most powerfully, depending on the situation. But that secondary energy modifies that a little bit just to talk about how someone goes about approaching it. Like a driven driver approaches a situation by driving right through it. So they're a driven driver, get out of their way. I promise you there's going to be consequences. There's going to be collateral damage. Where an expressive driver wants to move things forward, but moves things forward by expressing themselves and getting other people to express. So when we looked at another layer, you found out this is where the influencing skill is. This is where people get motivating, etc. So they're trying to get into not only your head, but your heart to awaken some sort of feeling. An amiable driver is primarily a driver, but they are driven to do something that impacts other people. So, and we talked about that in grand detail if you want to review the video on that. And an analytical driver wants to accomplish something. They're primarily a driver, but they're all about how do we go about doing that? What's the facts? What's the figures? What's the process? What's that? They want to really figure it out. Now, I did say that even if you move slightly in any direction, things are going to change. And that's where we talk about tertiary energies. So there is a driven driver. There's even a driven driver. So you can get really fine-tuned as you do that. But honestly, for people that are just getting exposed to this for the first time, or until you're really comfortable and fluent with understanding the differences between these primary, secondary energies, these 16 different energies, don't bog yourself down with it. Just know that no one exists at a fixed location on the change grid. There are countless shades of gray everywhere around you. There are subtleties and nuances, but don't worry about subtleties and nuances until you feel comfortable with these different 16 energies. And so, yeah, now we focus on the driver, but we could go around the others. And I think I'll be doing that as we are start to look at other people's change grids. And that just know that most of the life that we're talking about is going to be lived somewhere outgrid, maybe slightly upgrid, maybe slightly downgrid, but we don't want to be too far up or too far down because then there's too much or too little tension and or too much or too little drive. So questions, comments about this little map of the 16 energies?
What I like about this particular layer is the fact that I was just having a conversation yesterday about the symbiotic relationship between perspective and perception,
Yes.
right? Those are two attentional faculties, but the way they process information is different. So we tend to meet contextually in a given moment based on our perspective of something, but then the perception based on your experiences and how the brain associates quite easily with interpretation of that experience is brought to bear.
Yes.
And so often there's a little gap there. So what this helps me to see is exactly how people are contextualizing the particular activity in that moment.
Mhm.
And that's really good insight
It's
for
very good insight for
and
whether
that goes,
you're
in fact, I think it goes beyond the personality in some regards, right? Because
right.
you getting underneath the hood of that personality.
You're right. And I want to just add to that that personalities hold true when you are in a, what do I want to say, a default location for you. So every person has their own little default location on the change grid, the place they call home, a place where they just seem to naturally reside. And you would not be at all surprised to find out that if they took a personality test, it's likely to end up showing them or describing for them what that home base really looks like. But life isn't lived exclusively at your home base. All of us are going to be exposed to situations that are going to compel us or require us to behave out of type. So even though I'm an analytical type, make no mistake about it. I'm down here in the analytical world and blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to tell you, if something were to happen that requires immediate attention, don't think I'm going to stay down here in analytical. I am going to be moved out of my type, out of my home base, and I'm probably going to have to do something to intervene, drive a little bit more, express a little bit more, care a little bit more. We all have a full range of situations we have to deal with in life. And dealing with all situations through the same personality lens is not going to bode well for you being able to handle those specific situations as effectively as you could. Does that make sense?
Very
Yes. Is that natural for some, or is it, how do I ask, is it
Oh, it's all this
difficult
is
for some people to move like that if you understand where your natural
yeah.
spot is?
What I would say about that is that none of this stuff that I've been describing for you and none of the work on which this is based was invented. It was all just
Mm,
noticed. So everything we're talking about is inherent in the human experience. So
mm,
I didn't create tension. I didn't create energies. They've existed since, I don't know, when we first crawled out of the ocean. I've got no idea, but it's been part of the fabric of human existence far, 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 far long. All we're really doing is noticing patterns in human behavior to help us be more effective at understanding how and why someone is behaving the way they are. And maybe we can use that as a way to predict how they're going to behave in the future. Maybe we can use as a foundation to help better equip them to be more flexible, to move more comfortably into some of these other things. Now, that being said, depending on where you are on the change grid, your ability to flex into another type or to morph into another energy becomes problematic. So I
mm,
don't mind just blurting out, if you're in a danger zone, your ability to be resilient, your ability to flex into another way of responding to it, they become tightly compromised. So in the danger zones, you're going to approach all problems with the exact same energy. So it's different. Yeah, I get it. If you're downgrid, then the downgrid danger zone, it's very different than the outgrid danger zone. But nevertheless, when you're the danger zone, your toolbox becomes very limited and gets confined. What do they say that if the only thing that you have is a hammer, then everything becomes a nail? Yeah, yeah.
mhm,
And so that's what we're really talking about. If you want behavioral flexibility, if you want to be able to see the differences in situations and better explore the most effective way to deal with those situations, well, you got to get out of the danger zones. Remember, we said that life is lived. Oops, let me change the diagram here. Life is lived between the green circle. Oops, get back where you belong. Is lived between the green circle and the red circle. Once you're outside of that red circle, we got problems. We got problems. And with those problems, there's some limitations that just arise in that person's ability to be flexible. So gifted students question, although you're all gifted, you should know this, right? Where on the change grid are you going to be most flexible, most receptive, most understanding, blah, 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 blah.
And the green.
Circle.
Inside the green circle for sure, the closer to the middle, the better. So this is where we become our best self. This is where wisdom lives inside the green circle, for those of you who aren't seeing all this, but inside the green circle, this is where our wisdom exists. This is where we're able to detach ourselves from whatever is really going on so that we can look at it a bit more objectively and decide what, if anything, needs to be done. And, then move out there between the green and the red to do it. So, yeah.
That's the lesson I think needs to be taught even more. We keep talking about, like, in these projects, and I'm working on the population health, how, we came into this world and we didn't have an owner's manual
right.
on self, right? So
Yeah.
I think we need more of that. As the more I keep seeing the mental health statistics, especially with the younger generations, it's horrible.
It is horrible, but you also have to factor in there, why is it at least seemingly getting more and more horrible? Well, it has to do with what people's motivations really are. So you just be you and recognize that you are surrounded by other people who want you to do what they want you to do. So whether they're trying to change your ways of thinking about something or changing your actions, your beliefs, or whatever, humanity is not all supportive of one another. So there are people that are out there, and they're out there in great abundance, that are really trying to manipulate you, who are trying to usurp your value, your wisdom, your knowledge, your ability. They're trying to pull that out from under you so that you become more, I want to say, susceptible or receptive to whatever it is they're trying to do. So that's part of the problem, is if you've got one person who's trying to derail you, you can probably handle that. But if you're living in today's world, how many outlets are there for people trying to influence you?
Exactly.
Right. You're surrounded by them, all forms of media. It's all just bombarding people. And humans don't function very well with too much information coming too quickly. So without getting too advanced students in all this, I feel comfortable sharing this one. So if you study neurolinguistic programming or you study hypnosis, in fact, Edie is on the call and she's a certified hypnotherapist, so she can kind of do this. The human mind, the conscious human mind, can only juggle a relative handful of pieces of information at a particular moment in time. And so the general rule is 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information is what a person can handle before they get pulled into a bit of a trance sort of state. And so that's between 5 and 9. Then if you've got more than 5 or 9 things happening in your life in any given moment, suddenly the guard that is up, that is preventing bad messages, bad advice, bad whatever from getting into your brain, goes directly into your brain. So because your brain's occupied, your conscious mind is full. And this is why the power of distraction ends up becoming a very, let me say, dangerous thing, because if they can distract us from what's really going on, and at the same time give us things to think about that may or may not even have any basis in reality, but nevertheless have been presented to us as a question or a truth or whatever, our mind is getting more and more occupied. Now add to that you're hungry. Hunger occupies one of those things, because you're thinking, I need to eat, or if you got to go to the bathroom, these chunks, these available chunks of room in the conscious mind can get filled up very, very quickly. And so the faster information is coming to us, the more quickly those blocks get full. And the moment those blocks are full, the gateway into your subconscious mind becomes wide open. So
Yeah.
Edie, I don't know if you're in a place you can unmute. Did I say anything that was correct there, or do you want to fix me?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah.
In fact, in neuroscience, we always talk about the first order for the brain is to preserve and conserve energy. And so that gives more credence to understanding the contextual components of these energies at any
Yeah.
given point in time, because everything we do has an energy consequence.
That's right. And we only have, whether we want to use the word bandwidth for it, or we just want to talk about focus, whatever, we can only handle so much at once. And all of us are going to get overwhelmed. Depending on your personality type, you can get overwhelmed a lot more quickly than someone who is of a different personality type. Like, for example, I'm an analytical. We can get overwhelmed very quickly, very easily, because we're already focused on something. We're like an expressive type that's out there, being the life of the party and feeling things and that it's amazing how much they can juggle and still, get good things happening. Obviously, if you're a driver, you're a blend of those kind of two, and you have a little bit more purpose. But point is, I just wanted to say to your point, Brian, that not only are we moving around, but we are surrounded by people who are trying to move us to where they want us to end up. And that can end up robbing us of our freedoms, our individualities, our control over our own destiny, all those sorts of things. So,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
why, by the way, we talk about the importance of you getting into the green circle and staying in the green circle, because that's where you're the one who is most in charge of whatever it is you're thinking and doing, et cetera. Obviously, you don't have all the answers. There's still plenty of room here for puzzles and decisions that need to be made, but you are somehow, let's say, insulated from the manipulations of others or the agendas of others, and you can kind of make your own choice, do your own thing a little bit more readily. Now, for those of you who have, kind of joined us and didn't have a background in tension management prior to the Oracle of the Self calls, I just want to check in and see, are you guys tracking with this? Is it feeling like it's the right amount, coming at the right speed? It's okay to be a little bit overwhelmed, but as long as you at the same time feel like it makes sense, I'm just trying to make sense of it. So,
Yes,
yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, I'm having like wow moments and, a little bit of overwhelmed, but
Yeah.
having these moments of, oh my God, clarity.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because one of the things that we've heard very often from new or newer students is that part of the overwhelm they're experiencing is as they start to understand these principles and see the consistency in these principles, they're now looking at their own present life through a very different lens. And things that once bothered them don't bother them anymore, or at least they're detached enough to be able to look at
I'm
it
waiting for that.
a bit more. It'll come. It'll come.
Praying for that.
Yeah, a little bit more, objectively or whatever. But then what happens is that they start to look at history and go, if I had known this when I was in the situation with so and so, or had I known this 20 years ago, blah, 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 I
Oh my
would.
God, I certainly have that.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really overwhelming, because people start looking back over their life and feeling um, at most, we just want you to feel aware of how tension was playing out back then. But there's no reason to attach value judgments to it. You know what I mean? Because it's done, it's history.
Well,
So,
yeah.
learn from it so you don't repeat whatever the patterns are, but just being able to keep yourself more in the green circle automatically brings a little bit more I want to say power over yourself, protection over yourself.
So is it normal then? I think I met you and Linda back in 2003. I still feel, I don't know if the word is overwhelmed, but I'm still like in awe of the magnitude and scope of it. Like I always look for ways to implement it in what I'm doing, in healthcare and helping people change their behaviors. Like when I see the CDC's report on leading cause of death, still cardiovascular and cancer 1 and 2. So I'm thinking about, okay, well, what is prevention? What are we doing to actually prevent this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what you've learned is that everything is tension management.
Right.
Right. And so why don't people follow everybody intellectually knows that being overweight and I'm not talking about a little overweight. In fact, when I went through massage school, one of the things that we learned was that people that are slightly overweight are going to be healthier in the long run than people that are underweight. And so, and part of it has to do with being able to maintain sufficient muscle mass as you get older, so you don't end up frail or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with people having a few extra pounds on them. This whole idea that we're all supposed to be able to have visible abdominal muscles is nonsense.
Right.
That level of, yeah, it's crazy. It's just plain.
Damn, I'm sorry, everybody. I have those feel bad.
Yeah. So anyway, but my point is that yeah, there's a lot that's going on that enables us to do this. So yeah, there is, I think, a lot of depth to the work. And I think that the more you see how it applies to virtually everything, haven't found anything yet it doesn't apply to, that opens up each and every time that happens, a whole new doorway is opened to seeing tension management from a different light in a different way, understanding those situations and preparing yourself to be able to move forward. If anything, I wish tension management was taught at the school level, because bullying would fall by the wayside if people became better tension managers, being able to manage their own level of tension first and foremost, but then being able to manage the level of tension of the people around them. So
yeah, but they'll still be sociopaths. So
there will always be
always
sociopaths. Yeah. Right. But the nice thing is that if we can get the kind of normal, in air quotes, part of the population to be a little more aware and observant of psychopathic behaviors and psychopathic people, we might just be able to isolate and help those people depending on how bad the situation really is. Because right now they're all among us and we don't notice until something happens.
Right.
So I'll tell you this. Yeah, if we could see their change grid, we'd know it a lot earlier, let me tell you. A lot earlier.
Yeah. This reminds me of like reading your favorite book. It doesn't matter, the pages and how many times you read it. The context in which you approach it offers a new perspective. And you're like, wow, why didn't I get this the first time I read it?
Yeah.
Second time.
Well, right. That's why we sometimes have to read a book twice or watch a movie more than once just to go like, oh, now I see where the whole thing kind of happened. Yeah.
Or sometimes just experiences in your life and you want to go back and read that book again, and then you have a new application and a new perspective. And I read a lot of I had strange reading material as a child, and then when I read Helter Skelter when I was 12, and
oh, good.
yeah, I should have been watched more closely, but I did a lot of advanced reading when I was very young, and when I go back and reread the books, a few of them, like Brian said, favorite books. You reread a favorite book and you can get a completely different perspective.
That's right. That's right.
Or see a different perspective.
Well,
really
even for those who I know, Brian keeps a journal, Linda keeps a journal. It's amazing how you just go back and you read this stuff you wrote, and you're talking about how you're thinking and feeling at that moment. And now that it's X number of years into the future, you've got the insights and wisdom that come along with that. You go back and you read what you wrote and kind of went like, oh, I was so off the mark.
Yeah, like who is that person? He needs to change grid.
But yeah, there is a lot of stuff to it, and as much as we're talking about it, I think I've shared with you guys before. If we added up all of the material we can present to an audience, I have over 350 hours of material. Most people in the world of tension management receive 8 hours or less of training. Kind of corporate client would hire us to do a day-long program or something like that. People that go through like a workshop, well, they might be getting 16 hours out of that 350. And even people that are certified only get 40 hours out of the 350. So, and the reason for it is it's just practical stuff. We always say that there is a level of insight about tension management that becomes completely fascinating for people who understand tension management and like to look at it and talk about it and look at the world through that kind of a lens. But that doesn't mean you're going to make any additional money off of all those additional hours, because it's too much to sell to somebody and it's just not practical to incorporate all of it. So beyond those 40 hours, it's all perfectly fascinating, but not particularly, what do I say, monetizable, if that's a word. So, obviously this started out as a
We're
business.
supposed to be making money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, early on, I was certain that was the whole goal. What parts of this, and it was
Oh,
what parts of this can I teach to an audience that they'll be able to understand it, but not be so overwhelmed during a day-long workshop or whatever that they check out, you know? So, and I've always
Well,
had
like you said, between 5 and 9 pieces of information, right?
right. And so that's why we always have to throw in jokes once in a while in the skill of doing classroom presentations and all that. You know that once in a while people have to dump all that's in their mind spaces. And if we can throw out a joke or something, get them to laugh or give them an exercise where they can talk to one another, you start to open up some of those receptors. Although I will tell you, and again, Edie could verify this, when you are in a hypnotic state, it is very easy for you to learn content because you're not debating it as it's going in. Now that's got to, obviously that's a two-edged sword, but nevertheless, if you really were trying to really just learn a body of knowledge or whatever, there's a lot of cases, a lot of, research has been done to show that if we can get you into a hypnotic state, even if you're daydreaming, that's a hypnotic state, just before you fall asleep, that twilight sort of state. If you're listening to tapes, recordings, whatever, of the material, it goes in, it's there. So, and by the way, you guys do know that your ears never turn off. So your
right.
eyes get closed, but all night long, your um, your ears or your auditory and your kinesthetic senses are running at full board. Your olfactory system is running. So in the middle of the night, if the house catches on fire, you better know that it's your nose that's going to detect minute particles of smoke in the air and wake you up because of that. So most of your senses are fully operational no matter what your state is at the moment in time.
So
Um,
may I ask this, when you were doing Oracle of Self, did you do it within an organization? Because it seems like the missing element, like we talk about community as medicine now,
yeah,
and we find that when people feel like they're not alone
yeah,
in whatever their ailment is, they tend to, there's longevity in that in terms of, or sustainability, I should say, and them being compliant and following through. Did
yeah.
did you find that in Oracle Self? Because then it creates a mirror. So if people are like seeing Oracle Self and they start judging themselves, that might not be good.
Yeah, see, now we're getting back a little bit to the world of Star Trek, because I would love for the case to be that knowledge can be shared freely and openly so that everyone can benefit from it. In fact, if you guys have gone to our website, you know the motto for our company for all these many years we've been in business has been information so valuable, we want everyone to know. And so that's always been the spirit. We want to be able to give all this away so that we can let anyone and everyone who would like to learn more about themselves, like to learn more about, tension management in general, but more specifically to how they're talking to themselves as far as the Oracle itself goes. That's what we really want to be able to do. On the flip side of things, there is a business aspect to it that was front and center for the first 40 years. But now we got you've got YouTube, we've got other ways to disseminate the information without it being time consuming and resource consuming. So yeah, I think people need to have these insights. They need to have this understanding, and the sooner they start to learn it, the better. But for me, the challenge has always been putting together programs that allow me to deliver the content in a way that is very logical and comfortable. And, you know, my audiences, when they give the feedback and that, I'm always saying, like, he's so funny, you know, it was all, the time went by so quickly. So there is an element of having to, I'm going to say, pay attention to the tension of your audience members so they're not getting overwhelmed too much too fast. That's why I never worry when we're doing this that people are cracking some jokes or whatever it is. It really helps the learning process if we can do those kinds of things. But yeah. Oh, anyway, so shall we look at another layer? Let's.
Yes.
Now, which one should we look at? I'm going to look at this one. This is about your level of engagement. So how engaged are you in doing something at some particular moment in time? So we'll talk about that. The other one I want to talk about is actually about radial trends on the change grid. So based on where you are on the grid, I can tell you a lot about your orientation, your reasoning, your level of self-esteem, how harmonious you are as far as your experience of your life in that moment, how functional or dysfunctional you happen to be. We can look at all of these things in great detail. And many years ago, I had a student by the name of Wayne Laviolette, and he was getting his PhD in social work. And so he had to do a project, and he used the change grid to talk about how the change grid can be used to predict with, I guess, scary accuracy based on his research, what form of addiction people are most susceptible to. And so based on where you are on the change grid, we can tell you what your alcohol of choice would be, what your drugs of choice would be, what your addictive behaviors of choice would be based on where you happen to fall on the change grid. And so that's a whole new layer. It ends up looking like an eyeball with upper and lower lids and all that sort of stuff. So I'll show you with a Delta 5 is what that was called, ChangeWorks Delta 5. So, but it is interesting that if you're someone who lives in the downgrid danger zone, you become very prone to addictions. If you're in the outgrid danger zone, you become very prone to addictions. Upgrid, ingrid, all four of these are very prone to addictive states. Only when you are moving towards the center do you find that you no longer need to have the benefits of the addiction. So we're not casting judgment. We're just saying that the reason why people end up getting addicted to something is, well, ultimately it's because there's some physical aspects to it that kind of lock them in. But going into it, they didn't say, you know what, I want to become addicted. No, they go into going like, I got to just get this off my mind. So maybe I'll have a drink or two, or maybe I'll go, and do some thrill-seeking sort of behavior. There are adrenaline junkies, and the word junkie is literally true. So they get addicted to having those kinds of rushes, and so they seek them out. But for people in the initial stages of an addiction developing, they were just looking for a way to escape for a short little while, and little did they know that depending on what they chose, it can become a real problem physically very quickly. And now we're dealing with something totally different. But danger zones are where people are most susceptible to falling into their addictive processes. Obviously, someone who's in the outgrid danger zone is going to make very different choices than someone who's in the downgrid danger zone. So, so I want to talk about this layer in great detail, and I also want to talk about this whole level of engagement. It doesn't matter what order we talk about them in. So do you guys have more of an interest in exploring the radial trends on the change grid, or do you want to learn about engagement and disengagement?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
I like the radio trends
All
because
right,
I'm
well,
looking at like myself as an analytical. I see that they're disturbed piece. That's exactly how
there
I
is
feel.
very much a disturbed piece down here. Yeah. And look what happens if you get even down into the true danger zone. There's no longer a disturbed piece. You're just disturbed. So we'll talk about this. Now, as I get into this, let me just show you guys the composite diagram. As you look at this change grid now, I know the first time you saw it, you kind of went like, what the hell is that? Looks like a test pattern for a color TV set. But as you were looking at it now, can you see how some of these layers we've talked about, can you recognize the reference lines? Because a ChangeWorks, yeah, a ChangeWorks professional doesn't look at it layer by layer. The layers are very useful for helping people learn it, or if we're working with a client and we're trying to get them to just focus on one little aspect of what's going on, we might pull out these layers. But as far as the professionals go, and ultimately any of you that want to become more fluent in tension management, we're going to say to you, just get used to looking at this diagram, because I can see the 16 energies. That's what those orange lines all do. And you can see the 5 levels of tension, and you can see the intensity bands. You can see way back here, you can see those 8 wedges we've talked about as far as people's roles. So it's all here, and it helps you to better go, if they're right there on the change grid, if they're at coordinates 8 and 8 and 10, well, look through all the layers and think about all the different insights you might be able to offer yourself or others, as the case may be. All
So
right,
that's the executive intention, engagement band right there, right?
Well, right now you would be in full execution, but you would actually be
Right.
in somewhat upgrade execution, which is different than slightly downgrade execution. So just because you're in execution or engagement, that doesn't mean that every place in any of these feel. Let me just look at this one. So. But I want to do the addiction thing because I think you'll find it fun. But let's just kind of look. These are the engagement levels. So we talk about as someone moves from awareness to full execution, what stages do they move through? And so execution is just a very aggressive or definitive kind of engagement. Engagement is really when you are actively involved in doing those things that advance whatever your situation happens to be. So you're doing whatever needs to be done. Well, one of those things you may ultimately do is that which brings it to conclusion. And that's what execution can really look like. When people say, are you executing on your plan? Are you executing? Well, yeah, but we also put it out here because execute means to kill something. Now you might be killing it and getting it all done. I'm killing it. I'm out there killing it, whatever. But if you're too far outgrid, you could also be killing the relationships of the people who have been around you to try to help you moving forward. So this is when we talk about the radial trends and we start talking about some of the mental conditions people might be experiencing. Out here is primarily people that are suffering from narcissism, but I'm really talking about having a narcissistic personality disorder. There is a certain healthy level. I wouldn't use the word narcissism for it, but there is a certain healthy level of self-awareness, self-appreciation, acknowledging your own personal truth and all that sort of, so you know who you really are. But the moment you start to inflate that or whatever, that's when we start getting into narcissism. Narcissism lives in the outgrid danger zone. So we could look at any healthcare diagnosis or mental health diagnosis, and we can pretty much tell you where it lives. But engagement is always preceded by some intention. So before you go out there and do it, you have to think about what you want to go out there and do. And you don't just want to think about it in some neutral, you want to say, and I'm going to do something about it. There's a statement of intention that, and intention is preceded by awareness. So you are now aware that something is really going on. And based on that awareness, you may or may not choose to do something. If you're going to choose to do it, you're formulating an intention to do it. And then that intention, what's the road to hell paved with?
Good intentions.
Intentions. There's a whole lot of people who are out there talking all about their intentions, but they never actually get into motion and do anything. So the intention does not necessarily lead to engagement, and engagement does not necessarily guarantee that people are going to finish the job, finish the trip. You know what I mean? So I'm talking about healthy execution now. Finish it, get it done. We do a program called the Accountable Self. It's still the same thing. It's still tension management, but it's more about applying tension management to your own ability to pursue and reach your goals. And so one of the things that we say in that is that just because you're on the right track doesn't mean you can't get run over. So,
Mm.
there are a lot of people who will go most of the way to achieving a goal, but not really finish it. That may or may not be a problem depending on what the goal was.
Chris.
Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
A second. Let me, David, there we go. There we go. Hey, Chris.
Who the hell is Chris?
I don't know, because we do have a Chris that I did see. Wait, is Chris on the list? Anyway, there are some goals that you could be working on in your life that offer an incremental benefit where there are other goals that are all or nothing. So an example of an incremental benefit would be something like weight loss. You might set for yourself a goal of knocking out 20 pounds, losing 20 pounds. But along the way to doing those things to lose that 20 pounds, you're still going to lose some weight. And so there's an incremental benefit. Even if you don't get all the way to that 20 pounds, you still lost 18, you still lost 15. There's an incremental benefit. There's other goals that people have that are all or nothing. So if you had the goal of having a book published, well, it might very well be true that along the way, you are developing a deeper understanding of your own material as you start to organize it into the shape it has to be to create a book or whatever. So there's some benefit going on, but not the benefits of publishing a book. So that's an all or nothing. You got to get that thing finished if you have any hope at all of ever seeing it on a bookshelf or seeing it up on Amazon. So that would be something that is more of an all or nothing kind of a goal. Can you guys see that there's at least two different general varieties of goals that people might have for themselves? Yep. Yep. And so that's what we talk about. Now, when we get into this in detail, I'll talk about the difference between upgrid awareness or hyper awareness. So the reason why you're up in stress is not because you're up in stress. You're up in stress because some kind of awareness happened. And whether that awareness was something that is hyper aware, where it's being like shoved in your face and it's inescapable, or whether you just kind of developed a bit more of an upgrade awareness, that awareness is going to lead then to more of an upgrade intention, more of an upgrade engagement, etc. Where there's also hypo-awareness. And again, we'll talk about this in grand detail, but depending on where you live on this planet, can you imagine a morning where you wake up, but you haven't even opened your eyes yet, but you can hear the sound of rain hitting your window? And you think to yourself, because that's the only person you can think to, you think to yourself, it's raining. Yeah, that's a hypo awareness. You're aware of it, but it's not, the house isn't on fire. You're just going like, oh, it's raining. Oh, it's raining and it's Saturday. I don't have to go anywhere. You get those kinds of things. There is an awareness that may formulate a bit of an intention. I can stay in bed. And so then you get fully engaged with staying in bed. So, so you could do all this, but just realize that there are lots of subtleties and nuances that are worth understanding as we work our way through these levels of engagement, or what we call them engagement rings. How married are you to an outcome? Is what we're looking at. And by the way, over just say if it finished, there's a certain obliviousness that we all have about the vast majority of things that are happening in the world around it, on this planet, etc. All kinds of stuff is happening all day, every day that we are totally oblivious to. So we more politely refer to that as being pre-aware. Whatever it is that's happening has not hit a place in your sensory world where your brain has said, notice this. So your brain is what's actually causing you to pay attention to something. It is calling upon your attention, depending on what's going on. But for the most time, your brain says, when I get you involved, you mess things up. And so you just kind of go on autopilot. And if something happens that I need your help, I'll let you know. But your brain really does most of what it does without you having any awareness, let alone involvement in. Is that accurate, Brian? Pretty much most of what
Absolutely.
yeah, it's like because if you try to get involved, it's overwhelming. You couldn't do it anyway, and you'd interfere. It's like, I don't need to think about breathing. Oh, okay.
Right, exactly. In fact, they're connected to autonomic nervous system, so it happens
Right.
automatically without your bidding.
And that's a good thing most of the time. So
Yeah.
it could be problematic, in other situations. But we'll get into this in grand detail, particularly if you guys wanted to use the Oracle of the Self as a tool for helping you. Our little nicknames for the accountable self is becoming a finisher in a world of starters. The other subtitle we'll use for the program is conquering the 80% existence. So the 80% existence is where, I'll just throw this out, and we've never done any research to prove the math, but you'll get the general principle that 80% of the population, 80% of the time is going to get 80% of the way to whatever they wanted, and that's it. So it's all an 80% existence. What if you were actually able to conquer the 80% existence? What if you actually were able to become a finisher in a world of starters? You'd be having a lot more done. Well, that only happens in certain places on the change grid. And so rather than doing what most programs do and saying, like, if you want to accomplish these sorts of things, then you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. We instead say, the only thing you need to do is move yourself to that spot on the change grid, and all those things that need to be done will start happening very naturally. So become an expert tension manager, and you automatically become an expert at other things. So anyway, there you go. All right, so this one is fun. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to just plant the seed and let you guys start thinking about this. And this has to do with radial trends on the change grid. Now we can get into some very specific ones that have to do with this key about orientation, reasoning, etc. But what a radial trend is, it is a trend that is going to be true at the center of the change grid, and its opposite is going to be true at the other extreme. Remember that these four red spots, these powerless points, are in fact the exact same spot. So if we think of the purple spot as being the North Pole, the opposite would be the South Pole. And as we move from the top of the change sphere to the bottom of it, you're going to watch these things change as well in very predictable kinds of ways. So it's kind of a fun thing to do once we put it into a three-dimensional kind of a presentation. But let's get back to this idea about addiction. So now, again, we do believe that addiction is a very real thing, and we do believe that the vast majority of people who become addicted ended up so accidentally. So it was not their intention to become addicted to anything and have all the consequences that come along with that. They were in the moment just trying to self-medicate some sort of issue that was going on, or they accidentally got exposed to something, or the peer pressure pulled them into it, whatever it is. But we don't believe for one moment that to Anja's point, unless they really are just a sociopath, I don't think there's anybody out there who says, today I'd like to become addicted to something. Is that fair enough to say,
Yeah.
So so we believe something unfortunate, accidental kind of occurred, and now it's outside of their control. Anyway, but we can tell you what's going on based on where they're on the change grid. So let's first just talk about alcohol. There are a lot of different packagings in alcohol, from the cheap and gross all the way up to the highly refined and sublime. Well, who is likely to choose the one form of alcohol versus another form of alcohol based on where they are on the change grid? So I think the easiest one to understand is the person who's very far outgrid. In order for you to be one of these outgrid people, you're the driven driver. Think about what you believe for yourself. You believe that your ability is very high, and you believe that the challenges that you tackle are also very high. So you are someone who has been able to accomplish things that other people would be terrified to even consider. So here you are out here, someone who, on the one hand, if you get into the true danger zone, you start to become narcissistic. You start to believe your own PR. You start to inflate whatever these beliefs are about yourself. But there is a time when you are actually a good historian, a good someone with correct awareness of themselves and others. It's when you spill into the other side that this becomes problematic. Now, And you can look at these words. People that are in the outgrid danger zone tend to be exclusively self-oriented. They're not interested in other people. They're not interested in just the facts, the truth, the figures, whatever it is. They're all self-oriented. They're ruled not so much by logic. They're ruled by emotion, but they will tell you that it's all logic. But it's not. And while they would present themselves as being very proud and all that, the truth is that what's underlying the narcissism is toxic shame. There's something that happened to them or didn't happen, as the case may be, that has left them feeling so profoundly inadequate that their way to combat that inadequacy is to become a person that everyone will look up to, no one will question, everyone would be afraid of or hesitant to do all that. So they have to create this persona. The truth is while they want to say that they're on the top of the world and everything is great, the truth is they're at a very disturbed kind of a state because unless they have reached that point of some sort of psychotic kind of aspect to this, they would understand that what they're presenting to the world is in fact not accurate, and their grand fear is being exposed, being discovered. And so it's easier for them to kill the messenger. It's easy for them to sever the ties, to go into attack mode. So narcissistic behavior is extremely predictable. And there you have it. So as far as function versus dysfunction, this is a very dysfunctional place to be. Now you be that person for just a second and be that person who's decided that you're going to calm down a little bit by having a cocktail. So walk into a bar and tell me what you're likely to order.
Most exclusive thing you can.
The most exclusive thing you have, because it has to be something that matches the persona you're trying to project. So while there are definitely quality differences among different things, and I'm certainly not an aficionado of anything alcoholic. I mean, I'm not against drinking. I'll certainly have a drink once in a while, but I don't know anything about how it's prepared, what makes one better than the other, etc. All I can tell you is that Linda and I were on a Millennium cruise, and what the cruise line did was they gave us a bottle of Dom Perignon. Now, here I'm thinking Dom Perignon is going to be the most delicious thing I have ever sipped. And I took one sip of it and went like, this is just a bunch of marketing hype. So this was not good. In fact, the cheap bottle of champagne they gave us actually tasted better. It was more drinkable. Now, that's probably because of my unrefined palate, but nevertheless, it is also possible that inferior products, well marketed, carry with them the cadre or the I want to say the reputation of being something so far above and beyond that if you sample it and you don't like it, you can't even disclose that you don't like it for fear of being tossed out of this inner circle or this club. Can you guys relate to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can say that about with any product, right? Like I remember
anything.
the first pair of jeans I had, fancy the Jordache jeans, and they broke apart, and you go buy a pair from Sears that was equally matchable.
Right. I promise you, you buy anything that says Levi's on it, it'll last you for your lifetime. Yeah, go ahead, Anja, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Brian's too young to know about Jordache, and then he said Jordache.
Oh, there you go.
That was it. I agree with you. They were the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so, when we're talking about or doing training programs for people that are in sales or whatever, one of the things we bring forth is this little thought. There's two things involved in product success. There are good ideas and there are bad ideas, and there is good marketing and bad marketing. So a really good idea that is poorly marketed, what do you predict it's going to happen out there in the world? It's a great idea, but it's badly marketed.
So it's not going to do well. It's certainly not going to resonate with a lot.
But you can come up with the worst idea ever, and if it's well marketed, what do you think you're going to end up with?
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Success, right? So don't think for one moment that just because a product has been successful in the marketplace that it is inherently good. But for people that are in this outgrid danger zone, all they care about is appearances. So because again, they're not really at a certain point, they understand that the person they present does not match the person that they are. But sooner or later, they start to believe their own PR, and they start to believe that they really are whoever this, grandiose kind of persona that they've created. They believe it's really real. When they start to believe their own lies, what do you think the workload is for those of us in the world of human development?
Mm.
Math.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Money.
of work, and you know what? I don't want that job. So
Yeah.
because if you don't treat them just the way they want to be treated, they will never blame their lack of outcome on their failure to do what needed to be done. They're going to blame it on you. And so whoever's handy, never. Yes.
In the late 70s, Ford Motor Company wanted Lincoln to attract younger buyers, a stepping stone car to get into the Lincolns.
Mhm.
So Lincoln used the Granada platform and built better materials, better engine, everything better. Put it on the market, but they kept the price a little bit low, profit margin, so they could get people who were in their 20s to start moving into Cadillacs. And after the first year and a half, the car didn't sell.
Right.
So they did nothing to the car. They increased the price by 20%. And suddenly the car was just,
Yep.
people were
Flying
clamoring
out of the showrooms. Yep.
out
Yep.
the showrooms. Yeah.
Yep. Well, one of the things that I know has been studied greatly is how truly wealthy people spend their money. And the answer is that truly wealthy people don't spend their money. That's why they're wealthy. So when you think about these brand names or these luxury lines, they're being bought by people who want to be perceived as being wealthy, not by people who are. Crazy cars worth, the better part of 100 grand plus. These are not the cars that the world's billionaires are actually driving, unless the billionaires are still trying to prove something to somebody.
Their girlfriends are.
Yeah, well, this is exactly right. They're doing something else. And so this is my whole point. If we are in the outgrid danger zone, people can become addicted to alcohol, but they're going to favor top shelf kinds of alcohols, things that would impress other people. So rather than having I don't know, a glass of bourbon out of a $50 bottle or whatever, they want the $5,000 bottle, and it's kind of like, what? It's bourbon. So
But that's an evolved state, T, like for them to be that outgrid, like they didn't start there, right? So
of
they went
course not.
through
Of course
some.
not. But again, they're trying to, people who are really successful outgrid tend to not go beyond, they don't end up in the danger zone. So they're out there with full awareness, full knowledge out there. We would say at 10-10, they're doing the right things, they're pulling it forward, they respect other people around them, they're doing great business work, they're making great products, they're really impacting the world, but they never forget that it's not about them. So it's about the work of everyone together. It's about the bigger mission, vision, purpose. Once someone starts to believe their own PR, once they start to put the emphasis on them instead of all these others, now we're starting to deal with these kinds of problems. So they're going to constantly try to prove to other people, and at the same time, they're continuing to try to prove to themselves that they are a worthwhile individual, but they never heard that. If you look at the pathology of narcissism, you're going to find that earlier in life, they did not receive the messages that they needed to receive from the people that were responsible for them to help them develop a good sense of self-esteem. And so they never heard, we say in pride-based leadership that the three most important messages for a child to hear from their parents are these: you are safe, you are loved, I'm proud of you. You are safe, you are loved, I'm proud of you. Kids want these messages. They want to know these three things. And if any of those three things are not confirmed, then the child is missing something developmentally. So it's possible for you to keep a child perfectly safe. And you can even say that you love them. But if you never give that child a sense of their own value, I'm so proud of you. You should feel so proud of yourself, helping them to really understand that they have value, then for their life, they are going to be very likely on a quest for a message that they may never hear. And you can't just tell them, oh, you should be so proud of yourself. They need to hear the message from the people that they were really wanting and needing to hear the message from. And at a certain point in life, those people are gone. And so they're never going to hear that message. And as a result, they end up moving into a full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. So keep in mind that all narcissism is really profound insecurity because they were not receiving the messages they needed to hear most.
Such
So
a hard lesson to get to, this understanding that there's no amount of success that can make up for the lack of
there is not. It
self-acceptance.
will never be there because they know that because until they are validated, they're always going to feel that their existence is invalid. And so they have to keep doing bigger, grander things. And keep in mind, along the way, they're still doing stuff. They could be the wealthiest people out there. Don't think that for 1 minute that just because someone is wealthy, that they don't have mental health issues. Far worse than people who
Oh,
barely,
man.
make ends meet.
Same like we read about it every day in Hollywood, yes.
Well, yeah, Hollywood, but at least in Hollywood, they have to be a decent actor. They had to get the job. Once they get enough jobs that now they become a box office draw, now they're going to perhaps start wondering, am I really good? Or is this an imposter phenomenon thing where I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time? And thankfully, no one has discovered that there's little, if any, substance behind this one lucky thing that happened to me. Everyone can have a one-hit wonder, are out there. In fact, Tom is quite the audiophile when it comes to, musicology and that. I don't know, Tom, how many one-hit wonders there have been, but why do I suspect there's been a hell of a lot of them over time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been more two-hit wonders.
Yeah,
Just
right, because,
a line and they hook you in and then they're done.
Yeah, they don't have anything else for it. And, now they have to just rest on those laurels because they don't really own the success that they may have legitimately earned. And maybe it's going to go back. Now, they're not necessarily narcissists. When we're talking about a narcissist, we're talking about a real observable person. So we're over time. I don't mind that. But, I know we all have things we got to get on doing. Here's your quiz question. Just like we said, their alcohol tends to be top shelf. Another thing we can look at is drugs of choice. Your quiz question is, what is the drug of choice of someone who's in the outgrid danger zone? There's also behaviors of choice. So beyond addictions to substances, what addictions in behaviors is someone in the outgrid danger zone likely to find themselves in? So so just think about that. And next time we talk, we'll get into what's going on with these people that are too far outgrid.
Yeah, this one's going to be quite juicy. I like this
Yeah,
one.
it is really juicy. We'll talk about it first because they're also the one that are most likely to manipulate others. And so you got to get your control equation really locked in place when you encounter an outgrid danger zone person or situation. Because they're the threat. They're the biggest threat. The people that are in the upgrade danger zone really are in danger. So stay away from them, help them if you can. And the people that are downgrade, well, they're in danger, but no one's noticing. So, it's these people that are very far outgrid that become the real problems in life. Okay, anyway, with that, thank you all very much for joining in. And
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Linda.
Bye, Brian.
It's like an episode of the Waltons. Good night.
Good night, John Boy.
Bye.